Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining our webinar today. In today's webinar, we're going to be discussing using TM1 to facilitate your performance management processes, such as budgeting, forecasting, and reporting for higher education institutes. And we're also going to do a review of the recent success story at Portland State University and how they're using TM1. So next, I just want to go through the agenda of today's webinar. So we're going to start off with some brief introductions. We're also going to do an overview of stream integration. Some of you may not know who we are, so we just want to give you a quick overview of who we are as a company, what we do, some of our clients, and also our industry focus on higher education. And then next, we're going to do a brief overview of IBM Cognos TM1. So I just want to note that the purpose of this webinar is not to do a deep dive on TM1 or do a feature function overview. That could be an entire webinar on its own. But rather what we want to do today is really focus on how TM1 can be used for higher education. So for anybody on the webinar that's not familiar with TM1 or wants to find out more, we'd be happy to arrange a separate session and do a demo or do a review in more depth. So just let us know after the webinar if that's something you're interested in. So again, today we're just going to provide a brief overview of TM1. So next we're going to review performance management in higher education institutes in a little bit more detail. We're going to start with a recap of what a typical process for a university or college using Microsoft Excel for budgeting and forecasting may look like. And we're going to talk about some of the pain points and how a TM1-based solution can help alleviate them. Then we're going to talk about the Portland State University success story in more detail. I'll start with a brief overview of PSU and how they have used TM1, and then I'm going to hand it over to Jen Rudstein. She's the TM1 consultant that has implemented the solution there. She's going to talk about phase one, the budget automation or BAT project in more detail, and also the phase two, the student revenue and enrollment models in more detail, the RCAT and the out-year planning models. Then we're going to do a brief review of stream integration service offerings for higher ed, and then we'll finish up with some QA. So just some notes, the webinar will be muted throughout the presentation until the end, and then we'll address questions. So you'll note that there's a question and chat panel on the GoToWebinar panel on the right side of your screen. So feel free, if you have any questions or want to start a chat, feel free throughout the webinar, just type it in, and then at the end of the presentation, we're going to address everybody's questions. So, introductions. My name is Mark Erdman. I manage the performance management practice for stream integration. Our team is focused exclusively on implementing IBM Cognos TM1 and the rest of the IBM Performance Management suite of products to facilitate and improve performance management processes. So our main focus is TM1, but we also implement products like CDM, which is Cognos Disclosure Management, and Controller, and the rest of the IBM suite. Personally, I've been implementing performance management software solutions for over 15 years, including 7+ years at Cognos and IBM. In my last role before joining Stream Integration, I was managing TM1 practice for IBM services. Jen, you want to introduce yourself briefly? I think Jen is muted. Terry, can you unmute Jen?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. Hi, everybody. Again, my name is Jen Rudstein, and I recently added the Tomini when I got married this summer, but I am a TM1 performance management architect. I have been in the industry for actually 13 years, but 8 years primarily focusing on Cognos products. I'm a TM1 architect as well as a BI report writer.
Great. Thanks, Jen. So a little bit about Stream Integration, who we are. Stream Integration is a professional services consulting company. We were established in 2002. We won IBM Partner of the Year in 2013 for our information management practice. We're made up mostly of ex-IBMers, so most of us came from the original software company that IBM acquired. So for instance, our business analytics practice is made up of a lot of ex-Cognos and a lot of ex-Applix employees. So we have very deep experience in those technologies. And we have resources and offices across North America and also a European presence as well. So what we do, Stream Integration actually started as an information management consultancy. So really focusing on solutions around data management, data integration, data quality, data governance, and master data management. So we're really data experts and had very deep skills around any data management solutions involving IBM technologies. So, we're really established data experts, and from that point it is really a logical extension for us to expand into the business analytics application space, because having, sound quality data infrastructure in place is really key to any business analytic project. So from that point, we really focused the last few years on growing our business analytics practice and our capabilities in that area. So within business analytics, we really have three main practice areas: performance management, which is our practice. We have a business intelligence practice, which focuses primarily on Cognos BI solutions. And we also have a predictive analytics and big data practice. So a little bit about our clients and our industry focus. So as a company, we focus on a few key industries: manufacturing, financial services, healthcare, pharma, and also higher education. So we're currently building our asset and solution accelerator base around higher education. Our predictive analytics practice is actually managed in affiliation with University of Texas, so we have very close ties there. And we're doing a lot of great client work at some other universities, such as University of Oregon Health and Sciences. We have ongoing work there, Boston College, and obviously PSU. Also, a lot of our team members have experience with other higher ed institutes prior to joining Stream. Also in the works, we're actually working on a Stream TM1 accelerator for higher education. So this is going to be a pre-configured TM1 model that's going to help expedite and enforce best practices for any higher ed institutes that are looking to implement TM1 for performance management. So in summary, higher ed is a strategic focus for us in our company, and we're going to continue to invest in asset development for higher ed in the future. So next, I want to talk about IBM Cognos TM1 a little bit. As I mentioned in the intro, a detailed review or demo of TM1 is beyond the scope of this presentation. We'd be happy to do that another time for those interested. But I just want to give you a quick overview of TM1 just to set a little bit of a context around the webinar. So what is TM1? TM1 is an industry-leading performance management solution. So it's used for your organization's key financial and operational performance management processes. So budgeting, forecasting, strategic planning, long-term planning, reporting, scorecarding, all those key performance management processes. It has powerful planning and analysis capabilities. So it leverages in-memory cube technology that handles a large amounts of data with great speed. It also has extremely flexible modeling capabilities, so it really allows clients to model any financial or any operating business process. So although it's predominantly used for financial processes, because usually it's the finance organization that manages a lot of these planning processes, a lot of clients also use it for operational planning and operational reporting processes as well. It has automated web-based workflow capabilities. So for any of these forward-looking processes, it really helps increase collaboration and engagement amongst your user population, helps you manage these processes, and it also increases accountability for things like budgeting and forecasting. So I also want to talk about, 10.22 was just released. That's the latest version of TM1. There's some great new capabilities in this latest release, including real-time access for mobile users, so being able to do some planning and forecasting on an Apple iPad, better Microsoft Excel integration, integrated scorecarding capabilities, TM1 on the cloud is now available, and even faster performance than before. So again, that's just a little bit about TM1. I'm going to leave it at that point, and if anybody wants to learn more, just let us know. So next we want to turn our attention to performance management in higher education institutes. So to start, what I want to do is kind of walk through a typical planning process for any college or university that's using something like Microsoft Excel for their key financial processes like budgeting and forecasting. So, these pains really apply to all industries. It's certainly not unique to colleges and universities, but there are some reasons that make these types of processes particularly challenging for higher education, and we'll dive into that in a little bit more detail. So firstly, let's just review a typical budget and forecast process that leverages Microsoft Excel. It really all starts with sourcing your data from your key data systems. So most universities and most colleges will use Ellucian Banner as its primary ERP system. So that's going to be a key source system for many of you. In addition, you may have other systems such as payroll, Microsoft Access Database, or even offline spreadsheets that will need to be cleared to get all the data you need for your budgeting or forecasting process. So the first step of the process is really querying these systems to get the data you need to support your budget and forecast templates into Excel. So for instance, your latest month of your trial balance data from your general ledger. You might have some student-specific data like student credit hours or student headcount from your student systems, payroll data from your payroll system. So getting this data out of those systems and getting it into Excel. So this alone is usually a fairly tedious process. It's manual, it's time-consuming, and worse, it usually consumes the time of some of your key resources in finance every period end. So next step in the process is once you have this data in Excel, then you have to do some further massaging of the data, creating all the necessary templates, getting the data in the right places, doing all your formatting, basically readying these templates for distribution, another time-consuming process. Then once you have the templates ready and they're prepared, then you need to distribute it to these users. And these users can be across multiple schools, multiple academic units, or multiple cost centers. So when you're using Excel and you don't have a solution with a proper workflow solution, this becomes another manual process. It can involve lots of emails, lots of phone calls, chasing after people to understand where they're at with their budget, what the status is of their forecast, and so on and so forth. So just between the extracting and loading and transforming the data, getting the data in your templates and ready, sending these templates out to your end users, right here alone, you have a very time-consuming, very manual process. So next, once the templates are out with your user community, you'd usually give them a window of time, whether it's a few days or a couple weeks, to actually do their budget and forecast. And during this time, there's usually a back and forth, to get the templates completed. They're never, it's never that simple. There's always some mistakes, people changing things in templates. So there's usually some back and forth in this process before the templates are actually completed. And throughout this process, without a workflow solution, you really have no insight or supporting data as to the exact progress and status of the overall budget. Again, it's all very manual. Once you actually get all these templates down, then another process starts. You need to consolidate all these templates into something more meaningful. So consolidating all these templates in order to make the information and the data more presentable to the reviewers, your management team. So this usually involves creating some type of report book so that management can review in a more presentable format. So this report book might be sent to management, and then of course after reviewing it, there's always going to be some changes and adjustments. It's pretty rare when with a bottom-up budget or forecast that the first review is going to be accepted. So there's going to be some back and forth, and then the iterations and the cycle repeats itself. We've seen some organizations that go through as many as 10 or a dozen iterations and versions of a budget or forecast. So with this type of process, the Excel files can really build up fast, especially when you have dozens or hundreds of users involved in the process. So what does all this translate to? A process like the one I just described has many repercussions. It leads to a very time-consuming, manual, and laborious process. It consumes key resource time. So there's lots of non-value-added activities that can frustrate your team, long consolidation times, long cycle times to get all your data presentable. It's very error-prone. So this can lead to bad data quality, and even worse, that can lead to bad decision quality. There's scattered business logic, not having a single version of the truth. This really makes it hard to do proper analysis, and furthermore, it makes it really hard to do any type of real-time what-if or impact analysis. So there's a lot of other issues associated with a process like this that's really driven by Excel. So that's kind of just the tip of the iceberg, but I'll kind of leave it at that. So as I said earlier, This is certainly not unique to universities and colleges. Every organization that does some type of planning or budgeting or forecasting and uses something like Excel as opposed to the proper technology will encounter the same issues. But there are some particular demands in higher education that make such processes particularly problematic. Overall, in higher ed, there's an increased pressure for higher education institutes to really efficiently use funds, especially funds that are public. You really need to have proper processes to accurately plan and accurately plan funding and grants. You need to be able to accurately plan and manage student fee revenues. You need to effectively plan allocation of funds to ensure that quality and relevant education services are being delivered. You need to have efficient expense management, especially around labor costs. And overall, you need to accurately model and plan cash flows. So again, every organization, every company has similar pressures. So why isn't this applicable to all industries? It is, but few, if any, industries in our economy in recent decades have experienced the price and cost increases as massive as those in higher education. So on the left side here, there's a few statistics I want to talk about. Between 1982 and 2007, that's a 25-year span, adjusted for inflation, tuition fees have increased by over 439%. So if you break that down, that's a 6 to 7% annual increase over that 25-year period. The average university or college spends $4 to $5 on overhead for every single dollar spent on what they should be doing, which is teaching, testing, and research. So the overall impact of this is basically college is becoming increasingly out of reach for the average family. Families have to take on massive amounts of debt in order to afford it. There's some references down here, so if anybody wants to look into those numbers further, I'm happy to send out where I got that from. Furthermore, higher education also has to contend with, state and federal legislature that can always be changing. This can add further pressure on external reporting and disclosure reporting requirements as well. So overall, what does this translate to? It translates to higher education institutes really need an effective and efficient way to plan and control expenses and revenue. So this next slide is just an example to demonstrate what an efficient planning process can look like when you're using the proper technology. So one database or one source of the truth, minimal administration, automated source system integration and synchronization, minimal back and forth and minimal iterations and minimal versions, and overall happy management. If I go back to slide 11, you can look at a process that's run with Excel. You can see the inefficiencies throughout. Contrast that to the process using TM1 or a proper technology, and you can see the difference, a much cleaner, much more efficient solution. So what would you rather have? So next we want to talk about the PSU case study in a little bit more detail. I'll pass it over to Jen shortly to talk about TM1 and how we implement it for PSU to optimize their performance management processes. But to start, I just want to go through a little bit about PSU as a higher education institute. So PSU is Oregon's largest and most diverse university. They have over 3,500 staff members. They have over 29,000 students. They offer more than 220 undergraduate, master's, and doctoral degrees, options across over 8 schools and over 50 academic offices. So they're a sizable higher ed institute for sure. They're a leader in education services, specifically around sustainability and community-based learning, and they're recognized throughout the world for programs like urban planning, social work, and environmental studies. So Portland State University, they purchased TM1 over 3 years ago. The initial goal of the purchase was to replace their Excel-driven financial and operational planning processes. And they also had an existing investment in Cognos BI. So they wanted to complement that investment in the Cognos stack further by using TM1 to complement BI. So that's a little bit about PSU, and now we're going to talk about the PSU case study and the TM1 work we've done there, and I'm going to pass it over to Jen Repstein, as she did the majority of the work.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark. Hi, everybody. So for the first phase of our project, the goals and the primary focus was to build an overall operating budgeting process that integrated their existing student fee committee and forecasting process with their annual budgeting process. Both of the processes, they share a web-based workflow-driven application, and that's for their revenue planning, operating expenses, and a detailed driver-based salary expense. All of the organizations at PSU now, they share the same underlying methodology and calculations, and we were able to successfully integrate their student fee committee allocation processes within the same modules. Even though the student fee committee process the submission process, it differs from their annual budgeting process. TM1 is extremely flexible, and there's many ways that you can handle that with working versions, scenarios, or applications. In our case, we were able to accommodate both processes within one application as their submission processes did not overlap. So just to talk a little bit more about their student fee forecasting process, what they do is they allocate their student fee revenue to various within Portland State University based on their number of students, and they go through 4 submission cycles. They go through an initial request, an initial allocation, an appeal, and a final allocation. And in order to facilitate the review sessions between each submission cycle, they actually use the tool as a means of communication as well. So when they would go in and request the dollars, they also would comment within the tool about why they were requesting those dollars, and that's the student fee committee communicating with Portland State University's budget office in terms of approving those allocations and the appeal process. So in order to facilitate that communication as well, we reported off of TM1 using Cognos BI reporting, and we built a detailed report showing not only their dollars, but all the commentary next to the dollars, so that when they went to their meetings, they could print out the report and easily review all the commentary, and that assisted them in making those decisions. Before, the process was very manual in Excel, and everybody had their own spreadsheets. This is a great way for them to pull together the entire story and, like I said, make those decisions on how to allocate those dollars. So the overall budgeting process that we automated, it spanned 11 units and 475 organizations that they actually planned revenue and expenses for. We collected that data from the fiscal officers, and they planned their budget by their fund, organization, the account, the program, the activity, and location chart of accounts. They also leverage a detailed salary and benefit forecasting model that's down to the employee level, and it's being used year-round. The major benefits that they're seeing right now is the real-time impact analysis of changing any data point, driver, or assumption, and the ability to quickly report consolidated results. Furthermore, we've centralized and standardized all their salary calculations, and the global assumption capabilities that they now have are extremely important to PSU. I'm sure many of you have experienced this, but during their Excel process of planning salary, they had some major pain points in the decentralization of those spreadsheets using different calculations. Just purely trying to consolidate all of the spreadsheets was an extremely manual effort, and they never had the ability to quickly see the impact of a change at the total PSU level. So TM1 is extremely beneficial in its consolidation capabilities alone. So Mark, if you could flip to the next slide, let's talk about some of the key benefits and features. So the web-based workflow, it provided an increased involvement and accountability for all the fiscal officers because the tool provides real-time overview and audit of the process. So when you enter into the tool, there are workflow states. So they were able to actually see all 475 organizations and the state of of the budgeting and planning process, meaning organizations that had not even been started yet, ones that were in progress, budgets that had already been submitted or rejected. So it gave them great visibility to where they were at within the planning process, and again, also put accountability on the contributors for the organizations that they were responsible for. TM1, it has the seamless synchronization of the dimensions, and we centralized, and it has a centralized and automated integration from PSU's ODS. And so now the fiscal officers, for the first time in their planning process, can rely on just one source of the truth when it comes to the data and all the history. Prior to implementing TM1, PSU was already well into their BI reporting initiatives. And so what is great is that the fiscal officers now can run a BI report off of the ODS and actually tie out all of the data that they're seeing in the TM1 models. And that would obviously gives them more confidence in the data that they're using. It also has now reduced the time that the fiscal officers were spending on gathering and validating the data themselves, and they can spend more time on actually analyzing the data and making their decisions. They also now, for the first time, can report at all levels of their chart of accounts and see the real-time automated consolidation into their overall PSU budget. Another great feature of the tool is that it allows for multiple input cycles. And so at PSU, we actually did have multiple input cycles and archiving processes for both numeric and string data. What this provided PSU was an automatic version variance and improved scenario analysis. All of these benefits resulted in a reduction of the budget cycle time at PSU. Mark, can you flip to the next slide? All right, so the second phase of the project, we focused our attention on the goals, and the goals were to forecast the student enrollment, calculate tuition revenue, and to allow for multiple methodologies to be used. And most importantly, like we keep saying, they wanted to see an immediate impact on the tuition revenue calculation based on any changes that had been made in the enrollment models. One of the methodologies that we used was based on a Markov model, and it forecasts headcount, student credit hours, and FTE at the student level. This same model also generates a continuous student flow, which basically is forecasting how many students will continue on to the next term and at what student level, how many will drop out, and how many will become degree. The student flow allocations are based on the same term from the prior year, transition rates, and we multiplied that against the continuing students from the prior term. So the student model, it was intended to set the base for the academic units to forecast their headcount and SCH by course, and that's the second methodology that we used. That is the course enrollment model. And that model forecasts student enrollment by department by course number for total number of sections. Instruction method, such as traditional, which face-to-face, hybrid, or online, and by campus type. The student enrollment forecast is allocated into the course model, and we allocate it down to the course level based on prior year student credit hours, again, by course, by method, by campus. The forecasted headcount and the SCH generated from the student model and from the academic units in the course model is what drives our tuition revenue calculation. And it allows PSU to look at a side-by-side comparison of their revenue dollars based on the two different methodologies they use to forecast their headcount and their student credit hours. So once the tuition forecast is generated, and I'll speak about that in a little more detail in a couple minutes, we then take the results and we load them into the out years and the RCAT model. The RCAT stands for Revenue Cost Attribution Tool. So We'll start with the out years. The out years, what that does is allow for them to plan their revenue and expenses for future years. So what we're calling years 2 through 5 at a much higher level than they would have to budget their year 1 for. And what we do is we're taking the results from the year 1 enrollment planning process and tuition and loading that into the out years model as their first year base. And then years 2 through 5, they can plan at a much higher level. The RCAT, which is the revenue cost attribution tool, also goes out through years 2 through 5. So all of the forecast that comes out of the out years is then moved into the RCAT. And what the RCAT does is take the revenue and the expenses and it attributes it to individual academic units for schools and decentralized operating budget responsibilities. All right. Mark, can you please flip to the next slide? So let's talk a little bit about some of the key features and benefits around the enrollment process and the models. This is the first time there's been a consistent and standardized approach to forecasting student enrollment at PSU. And those key drivers that we've been talking about, the student headcount, the student credit hour forecast, they're based on historical trends with the ability to override and the real-time impact analysis, and the continuous student flow model and the centralized control of the graduation and the dropout rates really highlights problem areas such as courses with a higher than average dropout rate, but it also allows for them to really analyze their retention. And the automated integration of the data and the calculations has saved PSU resources 4 weeks of manual labor annually, and that is just for the student model alone. We are actually going to be reaching back out to each fiscal officer as they go through using the course model. Because their processes were so decentralized before, there's going to be varying areas of improvement for each fiscal officer. And so we expect to see a lot of manual labor, time, and effort reduced, just like we did with the student model. So Mark, could you please flip over and we'll talk a little bit about some of the key benefits on the tuition calculations. So the tuition model, it integrates the key drivers, again, the headcount, the student credit hours, forecasts that are done in the enrollment process. We bring in both forecasts, not only from the student model, but from the course model, again, like I said, so that we could see the impact on revenue and compare them side by side. Any change that's made in the enrollment models is immediately reflected in their tuition model. And the tuition and the differential revenue are for the first time calculated at the department level by course by student, based on historical trends of course fees and student types. So for the course tuition generated by student fees are primarily calculated based on specific detail codes and rates attached to a student ID. So this would be like their per credit charges. But there's also course tuition that's generated by a course fee that is set the same for all students. Residency rates are centralized and can be easily adjusted for what-if scenarios as well. And the academic units can also plan for new programs and leverage an existing tuition model for those new programs. These key features provide, again, a standard and consistent tuition model, real-time analysis, better analytics, and most importantly for PSU, visibility into how that tuition was actually derived. Lastly, Mark, can you flip to the next slide, and we're going to talk just a little bit more about their out years model and their RCAT model. The RCAT, as I've said before, now it automatically, thanks to TM1, attributes education and general revenue and expense to the individual academic units down to the department. Prior to TM1, this was an extremely manual process in Excel that touched numerous different data sources. And now that it's in TM1, we've gained a 67% efficiency rate in their RCAP planning, which is great. And I think something that everybody on the call would be interested in seeing how they can get those time savings as well. Now with the out years leverages the current year from the forecast, from the upstream models as we discussed. So they're going to plan their enrollment. We're going to calculate the tuition for the current year. That's going to flow into their out years model. Now all of their other revenue and expenses in the out years model are based on the current year budget, and they have multiple ways to adjust that or increase or make decreases to it for years 2 through 5. So with that being said, Mark, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Great, thanks, Jen. So much of the success story has already been documented. It's also been published as a success story. We called it PSU Graduates to the Next Level of Performance Management with TM1. So we've covered some of it here, but we will send out this success story. It's about a 3-page PDF, so you can read it quite quickly. So we will send that out along with the slide deck after this webinar. So what Jen went through was, really an overview of the work completed in the last 2 phases at PSU in the last 2 years, and the various business processes that PSU is already using TM1 to facilitate. But this is certainly not the end of their journey with TM1. There's lots of other future enhancements and other business processes that PSU will likely be leveraging TM1 for in the future. Some examples would be other fines and fee revenue planning, employee and position analytics, strategic enrollment planning. They will also want to extend their Cognos BI capabilities for some more advanced dimensional reporting directly off TM1. And there's lots of other operational planning models that TM1 can be used for. So really, like any business process in which you need to, model your business, you need to do some logic or calculations, you need to integrate data from other systems, you need to collect data from a user community. TM1's really a great fit for any of these types of business processes. And once you own the technology, the way the licensing works with IBM, it really becomes more economical to leverage TM1 for as many business processes as it really makes sense to. So lastly, we just want to talk about a few stream integration services offerings that may be of interest to anybody on the webinar. For those of you that have TM1 at your current organization, there's the TM1 Health Check. So if you have TM1 but you're having some type of issues, whether it's performance issues, functional issues, your solution's not being adopted by your user community, or it's just not living up to expectations, this is a great service offering. It's very low commitment. We typically get these done in about a week or 2. In this service, basically somebody like Jen or one of our TM1 architects, they'll come in, assess your issues, diagnose the probable causes, and then provide you with recommendations to basically fix them and address them. If you don't have TM1 and you're interested in purchasing it, or you have purchased it, there's also a quick start service. As its name indicates, this is basically a short service offering, low investment, that's really intended to quick start your implementation. So we include our Stream TM1 Accelerator, which is a starter model for any TM1 project. We go through some requirements workshops to assess your needs, and we do some high-level design and some implementation planning, really to get you started on your journey with TM1. And lastly, as I mentioned before, we are currently working on a TM1 for Higher Education Accelerator. It's currently in development, but it will be done in 2015. And when that is done, we will send out a communication for anybody that's interested in learning more about that.